Hello everybody, my name is Kari and I'm a part of UVU's Interfaith Leadership Fellows and the host of UVU Worldview Project. We are so excited to share the stories of 4 different students with different worldviews, beliefs, and perspectives. After interviewing each of these individuals, we will get back together as a group to discuss what we learned and ways that we hope to build interfaith dialogue here at UVU. I hope you enjoy these discussions as much as I did hosting them. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are talking to my queen, Sarah. Before we get started, Sarah, just tell us a little bit about who you are.
So, as my wonderful friend Kari here has mentioned, I'm Sarah. I'm one of the 2 co-presidents for Interfaith this year, which is very exciting. I am a senior about to graduate with my bachelor's in sociology, double minors in environmental studies and peace and justice studies, which is why I've been at UVU since 2019. And one thing about me, I am always reading. Just if you see me anywhere in public on my phone, I am absolutely reading something.
And writing. Sarah's a great writer.
Thank you. I try. Thank you, Barbie.
Of course. Okay, yeah, so Sarah is actually my co-president for the Interfaith Fellowship. She's one of the first people I met at the beginning of my interfaith journey. And one of the very first meetings that we had with all of the fellows, we all kind of got in a circle and we told each other our names and a little bit about our worldviews. And I had never heard of deep ecology before Sarah. And after hearing her kind of talk about what that meant to her, it's honestly where the idea of the podcast came up in the first place. Sarah was the inspo, so I can't even begin to explain how excited I am to be talking about Sarah and with Sarah. And then just hearing
honored.
More. Of course.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So everything about your journey is just so exciting to me. So I want to take a second to just get to know a little bit about your background. Do you have any experience with organized religion, or just kind of what was your faith journey like growing up?
Yeah, I am the youngest of 3, and I was born and raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My parents were both born and raised in the church. Both of their sets of parents were converts. And so my grandparents each converted to the LDS church throughout their lifetimes. And I grew up, I was super active. I take genuine pride in saying I was a good Mormon in the sense that we as a family, I always went to activity days. When I was old enough, I went to Mutual every week, all 3 hours of church. And it was my whole life. I went to seminary in high school. I got my Young Women's Medallion. I don't know if they still do that, but
I don't know either. Good question. Fact check in the back.
Being so excited to get that. And then when I was in high school, I realized for the first time in my life that I might not be as into boys as I would have expected. And so I had my sexuality crisis, which I look back on now and it's no longer a crisis, but at the time it was.
Yeah.
Because I was 16, 17, and just realizing, these deeply held beliefs of mine might be in conflict with some things about me. And so for a couple of years, I went through just kind of a gradual faith transition, really slow. And then in December of 2018, I sat down with myself and I said, okay, what do I believe and what do I no longer believe? And that was a big period of deconstruction for me. And so leaving not just an organized religion, but such a structured, organized religion where I spent so much time, that was hard.
Yeah.
And it had been my whole life. So I thought, where do I go from this? I explored a lot of different things before I found the kind of peace that I have now.
That is so awesome. I think it's so cool to hear you use some of the words we hear a lot within interfaith of just deconstruction and reconstruction and how ongoing of a process that is.
Oh, yeah.
So it's cool to hear kind of those moments of realization for you of sometimes when it is important to take a step back and really think about, okay, what do I believe? Like, what are things that I had claimed to know for so long that are now up for questioning? And I think that process, is stressful and scary as it is,
yes.
it just helps you grow in a way that just kind of staying complacent with what you know just doesn't do it for you in the same way.
Yeah. It's so much of my worldview now and my spiritual practice is based on nature. And I kind of consider the things that I've lost almost as like compost. They're not things that are growing anymore, but they came back to serve me in a way. They gave me some really good foundations to find new things that I cared about.
I love that. That's such a cool way of thinking about it.
I just think in metaphors all the time.
I love it. It's like my favorite.
It's because I grew up reading and writing.
Yes. No, I love that. Kind of going off what you said, I want to talk a little bit about what your faith looks like now.
Yeah. It's the way that I explain it to people is that I learned what deep ecology is in my environmental studies class. And it's essentially a spiritual nature perspective. It comes from an essay written by a man named Arnie Nass, and he contrasted two different views of ecology, or the study of nature. And he found shallow ecology, which is the scientific relationship of living things together. The fact that we breathe air that has been cleaned from trees that have been fed by soil full of little bugs and such. Deep ecology, as he described it, is the more spiritual component, that not just like these physical and chemical reactions connect us as living things, but that there's something more than human about it, and that the trees are alive the same way I'm alive, and we are made of the same things that make up the stars. Like there's a wonder to that and an awe to that. And so it's adjacent to paganism in a lot of ways. And I had a period where I was like more classically Greek pagan. It was a short period, but it was very good for me in learning, okay, these are the things that I do value. These are the things that I want to pursue and the things that I consecrate for myself as holy. And so it's not a formal, organized religion, but it's mine and it brings me peace and it makes me feel very at home just in the world, in my day-to-day life. And that's what I missed when I had my faith journey to start with, was a sense of place and grounding and connection to others.
Yeah. And I think ultimately that's what is the most important part of faith and religion and worldview, is being able to find that place of belonging and being able to understand your purpose. And sometimes it doesn't look like it may look for your peers, or even in this case, your family. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that your grandparents were converts, and then your parents, of course, like raised you in the church. How would you describe your relationship with your family now that you have discovered a new sense of self and a different worldview that is different from theirs?
I have really good relationships with my family now, and it wasn't always as comfortable as it is, but we have kind of an interesting blend of faiths in our family. So my mom, active in the church, maintains her active temple membership, and she loves going to Mass on Sundays. And she's always just been really interested in the Catholic Church and the deep history and the traditions behind all of it. And so she has kind of a multi-faith experience herself. My sister and her husband, super active. My sister loves genealogy work. Just side note, that is her hobby, is connecting dead people.
Love.
But she and her husband work at a Christian boarding school. And so they take their girls to chapel, just kind of a non-denominational Christian service. And then my brother and his wife, very, very active. He works for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in downtown Salt Lake. With all of these blends, all of my family members have said something to me along the lines of, we just want you to be happy. Like my mom told me one day, we were in downtown Salt Lake waiting for the train, and she said, I just worry that you don't have something that comforts you on your hard days. And when I told her that I do, she broke down crying because she could not imagine me feeling so adrift, and she worried about me. And so knowing that they come from a place of love makes a world of difference. And yeah, there's been some adjusting moments of them trying to understand what I do and don't believe, and me saying, I will still show up for you and things like this. I just don't have my recommend. I'm not pursuing that. But I really love my family, and I love how they're loving me for this.
And I can tell how important those family connections are for you. And for a lot of people, they aren't given that same privilege of having family members and parents that support them and just being able to do what feels right and what makes them happy. And it seems like that moment with your mom where you guys were able to connect in that way and her to be able to understand, listen, I am finding a lot of peace and happiness in this new path that I've taken. It sounds like that meant a lot to you. Do you feel like that's changed your guys' relationship now? Like, do you feel like you have an open relationship in regards to discussing different worldviews that you both share or don't share?
Oh, 100%. It's funny how much of my conversation with my mom at any point ends up talking about worldview and religion. Even before I started exploring anything natural or pagan for myself, she knew other practicing pagans, and so we have a long tradition of staying up on the winter solstice to watch a live stream of Stonehenge and watch the sun rise over it on the longest night of the year. Mm-hmm. And so moments like that have been part of our relationship for a really long time. But I think, especially with my family and my particular faith journey, it's so intertwined with my queer identity. And so a lot of the bumpy moments along the way have been about, okay, how do we understand Sarah as a daughter and a sister who won't have the same kind of future we always expected? Mm-hmm. And my worldview evolution comes into that. And so knowing that I can talk about these things now with my family and know that they'll have questions and I can answer them and we're going to be okay for it, that's so comforting.
Yeah. Do you feel like trying to navigate your newfound sense of identity played a huge role in choosing or finding the most relevance in deep ecology? Like, do you feel like there is a connection between your identity and your worldview?
I think there is. This, funny enough, comes up a lot for people who explore their gender beyond a gender binary, and they look at things like fungi, how it's just so impossible to classify different kinds of mushrooms and fungal growth because they're not quite one thing and not quite another. Mm-hmm. Looking at the environment and saying how many different kinds of living creatures there are and different ways of forming social relationships, it has brought me a lot of peace when I think of this is my identity and I need a place, I need a belief system that it fits into, that doesn't ask me to say I have to be one specific way. So yeah, they are very connected for me.
That's so cool. I know that we have touched a little bit about how those family relationships and some of those identity crises have played a role in what your worldview looks like now. What are some ways that you feel like your worldview has changed or grown as you've gotten older? And what was that experience like for you?
It's actually a perfect introduction to how I want to answer this, because it isn't just specific experiences, but with my family. I've mentioned my mom and my brother and my sister, didn't mention my dad, and that's because he passed away 2 years ago. But a specific thing that I can track as changing over time are my beliefs related to any kind of afterlife. So when I was in 6th grade, I had a classmate diagnosed with a brain tumor, and I didn't really know how to respond to that because I was 12. Later on that year, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was diagnosed at stage 4 prostate cancer. And very quickly, I had to reckon with what my beliefs in an afterlife were. And it was a huge comfort for me at the time, being so confident as a member of the LDS Church, because I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew what the plan of salvation was. I knew where it had started, where we were, and what was going to come next. I had classmates when my classmate did ultimately pass from her brain tumor, and we were in 7th grade at that point. And I had friends from our class in 6th grade calling me and saying, how do you believe in a God who would let a 12 or 13-year-old get sick and die? And I didn't quite know what to say, but all I could say is that I know so rooted in me, almost factually, that things are okay now. When I lost my faith, as I knew it in 2018, I had to reckon with the reality of I don't know what's going to happen anymore. Flash forward several years, in April of 2024, my dad was on hospice for 8 days before he died. That's so fast. It's normally a months-long process. And everyone else in my family, we had extended family coming to visit, and they were so at peace because they had this belief. So much of our family are active Latter-day Saints, and they know what the afterlife looks like. And my dad was so comforted by that. I never told him about most of my faith journey because I didn't want to take away from the thing that brought him peace. But I was the one sitting there going, I don't know what happens now. And so the best I can come up with is that energy never dies and matter doesn't die. Everything becomes reincorporated into something else. But I don't know if that means there's reincarnation or there's a specific place anybody goes. That one's still a big question mark for me. And it's been a gradual journey of finding more peace in the uncertainty, where before I had nothing but certainty.
Mm-hmm. I can't even imagine what that transition must have looked like for you too, where you're coming from a faith where there are just certain aspects that are very concrete. And it's like okay, we know this is going to happen. We know this is how this is going to be. And I think in a lot of ways it provides a sense of comfort and security. Yeah. But I can't imagine what that would be like to try to transition into a space where everything isn't so black and white. And there is a lot of trust or hope. Yeah. And just believing that I may not have the answers, or maybe they don't look the way that they used to. But that doesn't mean that I can't find a sense of peace and comfort in knowing that things will be okay.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it feels like, is even the questions that I still have, I think that there will be answers, even if I don't recognize them immediately.
Yeah.
And so learning to lean into that has been a new source of comfort for me, coming from a place of such structured, concrete, everything's outlined, you know this from childhood, into, I don't know. But I also don't know how everything in nature works, and it still works. So this will probably work too.
I love that. You're such a structured person as well. Like I feel like you have a plan. Everything in your life just seems, I feel like if you could color code your life, you would. And so I can see why. Do you? Okay.
I have a color-coded Google Calendar. I hand annotated all of my research articles for my senior capstone, color-coded, each of them in a different color code order.
And that's what's so interesting to me, I think, about your passion and the sense of familiarity you feel within deep ecology, because it sounds like it's a little bit opposite of maybe that structure and like consistency. Opposite. So how do you grapple that in your just day-to-day life, where you do live like have such a structured routine, to a worldview that doesn't provide that?
A lot of my practices are about bringing things back within my sense of control. It's very psychological in a way, and like therapy oriented, but when I need something concrete to think about with my beliefs, the joy of being having a nature-oriented spiritualism is that all I have to do is open my window or step outside or just listen really attentively. Like my day-to-day practice, I sound like a kindergartner to my neighbors, because I leave my front porch and I say things like, "Good morning, trees. Hi, birdies. How are you today?" And yeah, a lot of that is informed by the fact that I lived with my niece from the time she was 18 to 21 months. And so I got used to greeting the world. But it brings me peace now, because it's grounding to say, look at all these different things that I can identify, that I am connected to. There's a tree in my parking lot that I spent a good month practicing, like, if this was the tree of life, or if this was Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, how would I interact with this tree? And so just this, I don't even know what kind of tree it is, the one next to my dumpster. But every time I took my trash out, I would walk up to it and I would say, "Thank you for being here." What a sense of joy that brought me, of could I relocate something really abstract as like a connection to the gods or divinity and put it right here in my parking lot? what if I do that with so many other things in my life? And so, yeah, thinking about what can I see that grounds me. I have tarot decks, which my brother continues to make lighthearted jabs about. But I collect tarot decks at this point. I have one about animals, and I have one about plants, and I have one about the water cycle. These things when I need more of a sense of control and a worldview that is all about not maybe knowing the answers. These different rituals and practices that I have help me feel like I'm bridging myself with this big, wide world that I'm already in.
I love that. And I love what you said about being able to find a sense of control and a sense of comfort in the most mundane places. Because isn't that what faith and worldview practices is all about? Is allowing them to be applicable and something that's easy for us to all find and have and keep a hold of. I love that idea of I find comfort and peace from the tree next to the dumpster.
Yeah.
Like that is what faith means to me.
Yeah.
Is just being able to find that in the most unlikely places. And I love that Deep Ecology does that for you in a way that there's always an opportunity to ground yourself in any circumstance because it's accessible.
Yeah.
I love that. What do you think is a stereotype or maybe a misunderstanding that people tend to have about your worldview?
I have heard the funny thing about having such a nuanced worldview is that the stereotypes aren't really directed. Mm. Like when I was an active member of the LDS Church, people would say, oh, you're one of the Mormons. And that had its own connotations. Nobody in my life says, oh, you're a deep ecologist. But it's different things. The biggest thing I could think of is the idea that I only care about the things that I believe in because of some connection to substance usage. I have heard that so many times of like, oh, it's because you're a hippie, what were you on? And I don't bring this up to say that anyone making those decisions for themselves on what to do or not do with any kind of intake is bad. I'm bringing it up because it hurts when people imply that the only reason I have my beliefs is because I hallucinated something. Mm. The peace that I feel, the concrete joys that I have experienced, the grounding sense of presence and being related to other things, those are mine. And I don't have those beliefs or those experiences because I made them up or because they were induced by something. And so when people kind of imply that, it's so much less of a hurt than other people's stereotypes have been towards other religious beliefs. But for me, that one it bruises a little bit because there are things that I love about my belief system, but it's also kind of hard to have the belief system that I do and the worldview that I do in Orem, Utah, especially when I think about my whole faith journey. There are times that I'm really angry about different things that I grew up thinking and experiencing, and I'm angry about how much grief I had to feel in the process. It's hard to talk about that with some people. And then there are times that I have so much love for the traditions that I grew up in and the communities that I have been a part of. And it's hard to talk about those with people who only feel the anger. Mm. I have spanned so many different places and ways of being and ways of believing that it almost feels like I have to compartmentalize one part or another to talk with somebody about the fullness of it all. And that is frustrating. A lot of my worldview conversations before joining the Interfaith program were online only, to find other people who were more willing to speak about these things than people that I see day to day in my physical reality. And so I'm grateful to have such few stereotypes about the things that I believe. It's very convenient. It makes my life a lot easier. And I know so many other people have more pointed and more prejudiced and more serious stigma associated with their beliefs. And I can say, no, there are stereotypes that bother me, and there are things that upset me about not having kind of a concrete community of people like I used to.
No, that makes sense. I love that you brought up how so much of that has shifted since joining the Interfaith program. It does sound, I mean, I had never heard of deep ecology before. A couple other people that I had interviewed, when I'd asked them what they knew about deep ecology, they're like, TBH, not that much. So I think that it is quite the transition to go from, especially in Orem, a worldview that's like, everyone like knows about it, to a worldview that's like very niche in itself.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear just about how you did find a sense of community within the Interfaith program, even though there's nobody that maybe has the exact same worldview as you.
I think a lot of it comes down to the ways that we talk with each other and like the language that we use, because the Interfaith program is the first space that I've been in that exclusively and explicitly asks people about things like belief and values. So much of the time, especially, at college, you're focused on classes, you're having small talk, but that's a subject that you don't really get into with people until you're like really, really good friends. Whereas in this program, it was designed to encourage these kinds of conversations. And so when I talk to people, I can say something about what you just said in your belief that you look to when you're having your most miserable days, or the things in your belief system that reinforce a really good time. There are things that I share in that, and there are things that I don't. That alone, of being able to have the moments of saying, from all these different parts of myself and all these different times and belief systems that I've been in, I have something in common with that, has been a great, almost like a balm to the parts of me that felt like I had to cut out elements of my life story in order to talk to somebody. Here, the invitation is to say, yeah, you're messy as a person. Human life is messy. You've believed different things over your lifetime. That's how growing up works. Let's talk about it. Oh, I love it. It's so enjoyable to be with people that I can explicitly say, here's how my faith has changed. And they will say, okay, tell me more. Mm-hmm. Why did that matter to you?
That's one of my favorite things that we say a lot when we're having interfaith dialogue is say more.
Yes.
And I think it bridges this gap between, we're not asking, okay, Sarah, what ways has deep ecology changed over the past 5 years? She's like, girl, got no clue. No, it's very personal. It's, okay, how has your faith, how has your relationship with deep ecology changed within the past 5 years? And I think that's where we do find a sense of community, or a sense of pluralism, is understanding, okay, everything I believe, everything I feel is based off of my experiences. It's based off of the deepest questions that I have in my heart and in my mind. And I think when you are able to connect with each other in that way, where it's about my faith, my worldview, instead of just worldviews and religions in a general sense, there is so much more of a sense of community and feeling loved and feeling heard and understood, even though in a lot of ways we have beliefs that are kind of contradicting sometimes. But it doesn't change that overall sense of care and love and compassion for each other, which I just love.
Me too.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about some assumptions or misconceptions people may have about your worldview. I wanted to talk very briefly about maybe some assumptions that you have of other worldviews. So just off the top of your head, not looking for any specific answer, what comes to your mind when you hear Muslim?
I think of somebody who's very dedicated to a tradition that's old. That is something that I love about Islam, which is a religion that I looked into when I was going through my faith transition of what brings these people their peace. And it is such a broad and old tradition, and there's so much history involved. When I think of somebody who's Muslim, I think they have dedication to the things that they believe. And I'm always reminded of the 5 pillars of Islam. When I first learned about those in my 7th grade world history class, I remember doing a project on like the different pillars of service and charity, and just thinking, these are incredible. People live like this. This is a kind of grown-up that people can be. And it was so exciting. I also think of just scholarship and how people will dedicate their lives to studying holy texts and studying how the faith has evolved and studying how they can benefit their communities. I have so much respect for Muslim people, especially knowing how difficult everyday life can be due to things like bias, both religious and often racial in origin. Especially in an area like Orem, Utah, it's not easy for somebody to have a practice that has like visible markers of who they are, especially if you're a woman who wears hijab, or if you are somebody who steps away to go pray multiple times a day. I have so much respect for, again, that dedication to upholding those practices and saying, these things matter to me spiritually and in my community more than a social pressure I face.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It is. Kind of along the same lines, what comes to your mind when you hear Catholic? It sounds like you have a little experience with the Catholic Church through your mom, but just what are your thoughts?
Ritual. There's a lot of, from my initial thoughts about Catholicism, there are a lot of prayers and a lot of teaching and a lot of comfort that I think people can find in the Catholic Church of there is a saint that I can speak to specifically on this life stress that I'm facing. And again, really old religion, but also very present, especially with Pope Leo, the first American Pope. That is so interesting to me for American Catholics who might now feel more connected to the Vatican City and more like the old history is very present now. But I also think of like art and artistry. I think of stained glass in chapels, and I do the same with Islam, honestly, where I think of astronomers over time and mosaic work. There are just so many beautiful expressions of faith to be found in these really old religions. With Catholicism in particular, I always think of like stained glass in cathedrals. And I'm always so excited when I travel to see a cathedral and stop in for services and say, look at this. This is how somebody decorated their space to say, this is a holy place. This is a place where the divine comes, and we are making beautiful art to reflect the divine back. I love that, especially in Catholic churches.
Yeah. My favorite thing about Sarah, what makes Sarah such an amazing interfaith leader is you approach everything with curiosity. And I love hearing you talk about some of these small details of people's worldviews and being able to see just how interesting some of those smaller details are. And I think that's what makes interfaith leaders so amazing, is their ability to approach things that are new with openness and curiosity. I think that's just one of the biggest things that I've learned from Sarah since knowing her, is just being able to approach those conversations with so much curiosity. It's like you're just excited. It just feels like you're excited to hear something new, and it's just very admirable. I love it.
Thank you. And it's very genuine. Like, one of the reasons that I joined this program is that even with as many questions about belief for myself as I still have, I love conversations with people where I can say, what is the thing that excites you about your belief? You have a holiday coming up. Tell me, what does that look like for you? What makes it special? What do you do to make this day special? Those conversations light me up because everybody has something truly, deeply meaningful to them. And it comes out in really grand ways, and it comes out in small ways. And I like knowing all of it.
I love it. Okay, just to close off, if somebody listening had never heard of deep ecology before, what is one thing that you would want them to take away from your story?
There is a particular quote, and I wrote it down and everything so I would get it right. But it's from Adrienne Rich, and it says, if you think you can grasp me, think again. My story flows in more than one direction, a delta springing from the riverbed with its 5 fingers spread. I feel like that most accurately summarizes my journey. Like, there's no single path or single point in my worldview evolution that can be separated from the rest of it. And with deep ecology in particular, it's that it is a spiritual reverence for how all living things and even non-living things are connected. I find joy I find reverence when I look at the mountains, how old they are, how they still stand today, how over time they will be eroded and become new amendments to soil that new people grow in. It blows my mind in the most beautiful way. And so when I want people to understand deep ecology, I just explain, have you ever looked at a sunset so beautiful that you wanted to cry? Imagine feeling that about every time you step outside your house. And truly not every day, because some days are really mundane. Some days I'm running late and I don't greet the little roly-polies on the sidewalk. But on the days where I have time and I get to look at that, it's like making those sunsets over and over and over again during my day. And it's such a rewarding experience.
That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being here.
Of course.
I've loved being able to talk to you and just hear a little bit more about what makes Sarah, Sarah. And I'm hoping that everyone listening can take a few little nuggets of wisdom from Sarah throughout their lives, because that was beautiful.
Thank you. And thank you for your time and for organizing this. This is so delightful.
I know, I love it.
You're incredible.
High five.
Period.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you have any questions or are interested in learning anything more about what we discussed in our podcast today, there are links in the description below.